All right, I think we finally got this figured out here. How are you doing tonight, Logan? All right. So just nod your head if you agree that we're not debating on what sounds better in an ideological sense. We're debating the solution that's better. Okay. Well, then guess what? I'm ready to get down to business. So let's get started. Well, the bias isn't on my side this time. So I got to start by saying that because this is a complex issue. When I say I support decriminalizing marijuana as a drug, I'm not saying I believe marijuana should be illegal in any sense of the word. I don't. Rather, I'm supporting an educated reform approach from a legal standpoint and the most practical, pragmatic, and ethical way. I believe that is best defined as non-enforcement. Throughout the debate, I will not only make this case, but offer an optimistic view toward solutions that benefit the most people, especially those who need it most, not the wealthy. I have 4 main points to support this case. I will explain. Number 1, cannabis should be and is a state issue. Federal and even international laws prohibit marijuana. And unfortunately, the federal government has and will continue enforcement, even where states have passed protections. And federal courts have also continued to uphold laws prohibiting marijuana, as the U.S. government argued at the UN to excuse the measures as otherwise meaningless. If it's believed that the more states pass initiatives or laws for legal marijuana, the less likely federal law will be enforced, then that is better defined as non-enforcement. Why are we calling this something else? Number 2, simply changing the schedule class from Schedule 1 as a substance with no medical value to Schedule 2 controlled substance with medical value would allow every patient access, especially the patient who doesn't want to lose a good job. They would be protected. It would be great for physicians who also have to consider this from a legal standpoint and face pressure as they can easily be pinned between sides. Schedule 1 class is a real problem no matter how you look at this, because it prevents studies of the drug value from being funded. That's right. We still actually do not know much about marijuana. All of the debate over medical marijuana could be solved overnight with a swipe of a pen. Okay, maybe not all of it, but most. Number 3, many legalization efforts come as a wolf in sheep's clothing. The actual intention is to capitalize on the failure of government to provide needed reforms. In return, they retain property rights and the right to control a substance in a manner that is bound into state law and government enforcement. If you've ever listened to anyone talk about free markets, be it Karl Marx or Ron Paul, it should be very obvious that this is a very bad idea because of supply and demand. The increased demand will not stop the black market or threat of prosecution, be the defendant an unlicensed grower, domestic or abroad, or even a user in many cases. The broader definition will protect more people from prosecution. Monopolization is not legalization. Last fall, an issue here in Ohio would have limited production rights to only 10 investors, even though a clear majority of as much as 90% of Ohioans polled as supporting legal marijuana in one form or another. It failed. This is why I believe in decriminalization, and that is the only real solution, not legalization. That legalization would have effectively been privatizing the industry to an open cartel. It would not have prevented enforcement of the law outside of the power of the state of Ohio, including in civil claims over employment for medical users. In some cases, such as misdemeanor possession, the penalties would have been far more severe. But supporters believed it would do all those things. Number 4, marijuana prohibition is unique, unlike alcohol prohibition. Not only because of international laws, but it's an organic substance and it is consumed as such. How can you regulate that? A global black market already exists. You may be surprised to find out marijuana has long been sold online. Will the so-called legal weed even be the same product hyped and advertised in magazines? I believe we should follow the Dutch model of non-enforcement and reclassify marijuana immediately as a Schedule II drug so every patient has a right to medicine without worrying about losing their job where they work hard. It's deceitful and limiting to believe a state can truly legalize marijuana itself. In reality, it can only contribute to our greater goal of non-enforcement as a whole by defining the terms of application. Effective reforms are legal approaches, limiting prosecution, providing access without strings. Okay, so I hope you can see this. I'm going to further illustrate. This is where we are at. This is can you see this? Okay, so this is the US. Okay, doing this real fast, so it's not the best drawing. This is international waters. Well, not international. So we're on the illegal side. It's illegal because the federal government, Uncle Sam, he has a big stick, and it doesn't matter if someone in Ohio or in some silly state up north, if they want to say, I want to have some legal weed, it doesn't matter because this guy, he has this big stick, and he's going to say no. And then he's going to say no because there's a guy with a bigger stick over here, and he says no. So this is where we were. Because when I say decriminalization, what am I defining? We have marijuana. It's criminalized. Okay, so this is criminalized. In the 1970s, the state of Ohio comes along and says, well, it shouldn't be a felony, so we have non-penalization. It's not a penalty now. It's still illegal, but the penalty is less. Okay, so we're not really quite the decriminalization. It's still a crime. Now, to get to decriminalization, we're saying that it's not only there's no more penalty, but it's no longer a crime, even though it's on the books as not being legal, and it can't be on the books as being legal. So we're moving toward decriminalization. But then you have somebody who says, oh, legal, it's got to be legal. I need legal weed. Well, the thing is that they're actually the monopoly man. Oh, really? You need some legal weed, huh? They got all kinds of money they're going to throw at you. Oh, get some legal weed. But the thing is, it's really a fork in the road. That's all it is. Because all you're redefining is what the penalty is. So there's still a penalty, so you're actually going backwards. Because you're going to say it's okay for this person to do it, but that person can't do it. I don't think everyone should have the equal right to do it. I don't think the government should enforce it. That's why the Dutch have it right. They know we can't enforce this, and there's somebody with a bigger stick, because it's not about who will let me, it's who will stop me. And they know there's someone, they know who will stop them, and they're not worried about who's going to let who do what, because they're defining this in a way that isn't deceptive. And when you say legal, you're being deceptive, and you're just trying to push the market toward you and your money. And we don't want that. I'm glad that issue 3 failed. Your turn, Logan.
Dang, that was quite a bit of an intro. I gotta give you props for that, man. I was impressed. I think we're going to probably kind of run into a problem, and one of the problems is the semantics of what decriminalization means. Because I agree with pretty much a lot of what you said. I'm a big Ron Paul fan too, so I get it. I get this whole not wanting the government to regulate it, and I actually agree with that. I think what what I would call what you're talking about this as decriminalization, I would categorize that as what's called abrogate. And this idea that essentially cannabis would be treated exactly like a tomato, that you wouldn't have any sort of government regulation, tax, et cetera, et cetera. And I agree with that. I think that's a good ultimate goal. But I don't want just this to be kind of like just two libertarians arguing over which of these solutions is more libertarian. So I have some other advantages that legalization provides that I think decriminalization does not provide. So first of all, I think the biggest point is legitimization. Legalization provides a means of legitimizing cannabis towards the bigger society, because if there's one thing that this cannabis struggle does have, with every other drug struggle has had, including alcohol, is a societal delegitimization. Alcohol became illegal in part because people were able to convince other people that alcohol was a delegitimized thing. Not only that it was bad, but it was so bad, such a moral evil, that we're going to use the threat of government violence to stop other people from using it, instead of just, using religion or using whatever method that was non-government related. So that's, I think, what one thing that legalization can do is provide much more of a path towards that, as opposed to decriminalization. Because the problem with decriminalization is it's technically is not abrogate. Decriminalization still involves fines. It still involves penalties. For example, where I live in Kalamazoo, Michigan, we are technically decriminalized. But the problem with is that it's still, you can still get $100 fine, or you can even still end up going to jail in many cases. And Kalamazoo is not the only one. There's plenty of places here in Michigan and across the country where decriminalization still means you can either go to jail explicitly because of the law itself and how it's set up, or because if you don't pay the fines over time, you're going to end up in jail. Which these fines and whatnot presents a second point of why I think legalization is better than decriminalization, and that's because of institutional racism. I don't think decriminalization addresses institutional racism like legalization does, because the problem, one of the problems with the war on drugs is that it is a racist institutional thing, that it has been proven time and time again that there is and racism itself is a large part of why, especially cannabis, became illegal. We can't let those dark skinned people smoke that grass and have sex with our white women. I mean, this was explicitly part of the reasoning behind it. And the thing about legalization is that you don't have these fines. Yes, it's going to be taxed. It's going to be regulated. I'd rather not have it that way. I'd rather have as low amount of tax and low amount of regulation as possible. But decriminalization is not how you get to that point, because decriminalization is just saying, hey, we're just not going to penalize you as much. That's what I would say decriminalization means. So I think there is going to be a little bit of confusion there. I hope we can kind of clarify what our terminology is that we're using. Another part of it is that the gray market is not necessarily better all the time. Yes, there are certain advantages to gray markets. And yes, there are certain, and I would agree that this idea of, trying to keep things on the DL and not have it regulated, yes, it's good. This is generally a good thing. But the problem is with gray markets is that a lot of times you still don't get as much of consistency. You don't have as much of an oversight. You don't have as much of a unitary sort of, hey, this is what our product is. So with decriminalization, you can still have like edibles, for example, that are just way more powerful than the person had, anticipated, or way weaker than anticipated. So that's one of the problems with decriminalization. Another problem with decriminalization is, yes, I mean, it doesn't necessarily be medicinal. Obviously, what you were saying, you already said, you want to get out of Schedule 1. I completely 100% agree. But I don't think that's necessarily true if you just purely decriminalize it. They can still penalize you for this and still hold back medical research that otherwise might happen if it was fully legalized. And I would even argue that really even medicinal, it seems to have so far been a better route for legalization than even decriminalization, because with medicinal, there've been, that's what research has been done, which is very little, I agree. has been able to be done because we've, given the green light for the medicinal. And we even were able to show, even before what little research it was, that, it's probably that cannabis is very unlethal. It's very, very safe. And so I think once that kind of was confirmed, then more people felt more and more like legitimate universities and legitimate, medical institutions were more comfortable about this. Because remember, the big part of this is legitimization. If you don't have the legitimization of this drug, the cultural battle is going to be lost. And that is part of how you get, cannabis to be, been left alone by people, because that's what I think both of our ultimate goal is we want people, to freely be able to use cannabis if that's their choice. Like personally, I like it, but I know other people don't like it, and that's okay. And I don't even need them to think that it's okay for me to use that. I just need them to not think it's okay to use violence and coercion against me. Decriminalization does not send that message. All right, so number 6 of my point here is the spiritual norms, because I'm kind of more of an internationalist. I'm not necessarily just thinking about this from the perspective of the United States. I understand that the United States is one of the biggest contenders in why there's not more legalized, decriminalized, whatever cannabis across the world. We're the leading country to make this whole war on drugs global. And the thing is, there's a lot of religions that rely on cannabis. The two big ones off the top of my head I can think of are some sects of Hinduism and the Rastafarians. And of course, ironically enough, very, not white, religions, quote unquote. And so decriminalization is still going to not lead, since decriminalization does not lead to that part of the legitimization, it's going to be a lot harder for them to use their drug as a sanctimony. I mean, the only time where a drug wasn't really legitimized, but still was able to use for spiritual purposes, was peyote with Native Americans. That's so far been the only exception I've seen of where this has been able to be a thing. When you think about it, if Catholics, if alcohol was just decriminalized as opposed to legalized, then Catholics would have a lot harder time drinking wine during communion. I think you could definitely argue that there'd be no way Catholics would be able to do what they do. Here's another point, number 7, speaking of international, the cartel. The cartel are not going to be hurt if cannabis is decriminalized. Because even if you're just them saying, oh, we want to be at a gray market level, they can outcompete gray market people. The only way you're going to be able to compete with this large set of this, very organized gang of cartels is corporations, and the corporations are pretty powerful unions. And yes, I don't want a monopolization of this either. And I agree. I did not support Ohio. Okay, I'm going to be explicitly clear. I did not support that. I think that was a bad legalization legislation. And I even look, and even this year's in Arizona, I didn't support Arizona's either. I think these are two examples of bad legalization. So I think, yes, legalization can be done wrong, but I think you can argue the same way decriminalization can be done wrong, because I'm sure you would be perfectly willing to admit that, like I was describing earlier with decriminalization here in Kalamazoo, that's not what you want either. You already pretty much said that from your other point, that you don't want people being thrown in jail, but that's what decriminalization in reality still leads to. So, and just, yeah, I think I can save the other points, and I'm just going to let.
I think you're confused, Logan. What you're arguing for is non-penalization. When I'm saying it should be decriminalized, I'm saying that the person would no longer be considered a criminal. They would not be able, you can't prosecute them. It's still illegal because the federal government or the international body, the UN, says it's illegal, but the state government or even the local government, which it should be better defined as the local government actually, because I think this is more of it is a state issue, but it would be more up to a community. So I'm going to re-illustrate this. You have illegal, okay, you have illegal, well, this isn't going to work. Okay, but you have illegal, it's illegal. then it's a felony. You smoke a joint, you go to jail forever. 1970s, even it's actually the Republicans who do it. They say, well, it shouldn't be a felony. I think if you can have up to 4 ounces or 100 grams, so a little bit less than 4 ounces. And I think that's a fair amount to just write somebody a ticket for. So now I've moved to decriminalization. Somebody can still go to jail for selling or having a larger amount than that. So it's not everyone, but it's a step forward. To get to decriminalization, which is the next step, which I had already explained, it's still illegal on the books, but the person is no longer considered a criminal, so they can't be prosecuted. Now to get to, and then there's even a further step, which is the step that I'm advocating for, which is non-enforcement. So you're not defining this as I believe it should be legal. You're defining this as I don't think it should be enforced. I will not enforce it. I will pass a measure, be through any means, be that through my local, through the legislative branch, the judicial, it doesn't matter. But I'm defining this as I do not want it to be enforced, because when I say legal, I can't cross into this legalization, because there's somebody with a bigger stick who says that they're going to stop me. It's not about who will let me, it's about who will stop me, and I know who's going to stop me, and that's the federal government, and that's the UN. So it can't be legal. So when I tell somebody I want something to be legal, like I said, I'm the monopoly man. I'm drawing a fork in the road. I'm capitalizing on this. I want people to be confused because I want them to buy my product. So again, I'm going to go back to the Dutch model, because they define it as non-enforcement. The drugs aren't actually legal there, and they have an advantage because they control the black market, and the best products, the products that people read about in magazines and that people want, they come from Amsterdam. They come from Holland. And they're proud of it, and they know they have this advantage. I can buy weed from Holland as soon as I stop talking to you. That'll be here in a week. So it's never going to stop. And a corporation can't stop that. All that's going to happen is if the corporation is going to come after me with a stick, and I'm just going to lower the price. And it's not going to change anything. I'm still going to go to jail. So you're not looking at this in a realistic way, Logan. You're confused. You're not defining it in the legal terminology that's going to move forward. You want to take a step backwards to move a step forward, and you're assuming that I will be some uneducated pot smoker who's going to let your corporation do that to me, and I'm not going to let your corporation do anything. And no, you're confused. You don't understand.
I mean, I don't want corporations to hurt you. I mean, I don't think you're an uneducated pothead. I mean, I think most cannabis users are pretty educated folks. The thing is, corporations are pretty powerful. They're not like, benevolent angels. They're not like the perfect, beings. No system of humans that have invented this perfect, including even gray markets, black markets, and whatnot. And at least with corporations, they've been able to provide lots of good stuff in the world. They're not, like I said, they're not perfect, but think about the greatest innovations we have today. Think about the most powerful entities besides governments in the world. They're corporations. Corporations are multinational, international conglomerates that can get a lot of done. So if they can see, yes, if they can see a way of making money through cannabis legalization, they're going to. But like I said, the thing is, I mean, I don't know, once again, how to argue against this, because it's really hard to argue this semantical point, because, I mean, this is why I kind of wish I thought about asking you about, like, well, what do you mean by decriminalization before this debate? That way I could really kind of clear it up, because what I'm talking about, like I think what you're talking about, like I said, is aggregate, which is this idea of non-enforcement. We're going to treat it like a tomato, we're going to treat it like whatever, we're not going to regulate it, we're not going to bother people whatsoever. And like I said, that's what I want. That's why ultimately I want. But I think legalization does not necessarily mean monopolization. Legalization, I think, can just really mean, yeah, we're going to regulate it, yeah, we're going to tax it, but listen, you're not going, there's far less of a chance now you're going to be, yeah, because there's still certain instances, sure, if you get over a certain amount or you're under an age, yes, you can still get criminal punishment. But that's still the same case with decriminalization. and this with how people typically define decriminalization, how the government itself defines decriminalization. Because whether we like it or not, and I don't like it, quite frankly, but the government kind of tends to define how these terms are going to be used legally because they're the legal entity. They're the ones with the guns. They're the ones with the power. They're the ones that are going to, push us around. And we can pretend that the government doesn't exist all we want, but the fact is they exist. They do stuff, and we have to just kind of we have to be able to outmaneuver them and outplay the game. So really, yes, I think the key is how you legalize it. So like I said earlier, not all legalizations are the same. Some legalizations are better than others. Colorado, for example, seems to be doing pretty good with their legalizations. And they have now some of the greatest products on the planet. And in fact, with Amsterdam, what's been interesting about them is actually they've been starting to regress quite a bit. They're starting to have more instances of people getting fined and getting in trouble for having cannabis because so many people have been complaining about it not being, legalized and having it being this weird gray area. People don't like gray areas. This is a facet of human psychology. We like having this clear black or white. It's this thing.
Thanks, Logan. I'm afraid that past couple of minutes you were completely frozen, and I could not. I couldn't hear what you said because you were frozen. So I'm just going to refute what I did here, and that is that you still seem to be very confused. The whole point here is that this is not a black and white issue at all. I'm saying that it's a gray issue, and I'm illustrating a clear path to get to the white area because we are in black area. As far as the Dutch model goes, yes, over the past 10 years or so, there has been some refute. But I don't really see that as a negative thing because maybe a community doesn't want marijuana. And I think both as libertarians, both you and I can agree that if that community doesn't want it, then they have a right to say no. Just as much as if your community want it and you want to say yes, you can say yes. And if my community wants it, we can say yes to it too. So this is actually a path to the white area. As far as competition goes, sure, that's a great thing. But it's Holland that they have the advantage because they have illustrated a model from the beginning that should be the example of non-enforcement and not trying to fool people into believing that something can be legal when it cannot be. That it's just a choice of the community if they want to enforce the law or not. And that's the point here. As far as going back to the the corporations, it, like I already said, this is an organic substance. It's not like alcohol. It's organic. It's very easy to produce. Anyone can do it. Anyone can do it. It's easy to produce. And again, it's not, as I illustrated, is from, I believe it's point 4. It's not like alcohol prohibition, because with alcohol prohibition, it was just the federal government. It was just the federal government's stick. It was the federal government that was going to stop you. This isn't just the federal government. People don't know that. They don't realize that it's the United Nations and an international law, and that the U.S. is, that we're the people who pay to enforce it. It's our taxes that enforce these laws. So that it's, the U.S. pretty much is the UN. So we set the example. So it's kind of hard for us to put back. And they will challenge this. So we can only move forward, and I have a plan for how we can move forward. And you don't. You're still confused. You want to buy snake oil.
Well, I like to think I'm not trying to buy snake oil. I mean, here's the deal. I mean, here's the thing about, even if we're going to argue, we want to have less amount of taxes in general as much as possible. We've already showed that legalization with some taxation gets the state lots of money. When the state gets lots of money, that's an opportunity for politicians to want to at least promise and now hopefully fully deliver lowering of taxes. Obviously, this is, not, again, I'm not saying this is a guarantee. I'm just saying that the likelihood of it is that you can, for example, in Colorado, look, they have so much extra money. They were giving money back to the people. So now imagine they said, well, look, we get so much tax revenue from just doing cannabis. We can lower. We don't even need an income tax anymore. We don't need these sort of property taxes, or at least less of these property taxes, and so on and so forth. So I think that's one facet of legalization that is being ignored here, is that it can be a good, if you keep the state nice and busy with this revenue gain over here, they're going to be way less worried about these other forms of taxation. It's going to be a lot more easier to appeal to more people to say, hey, let's lower these forms of taxation. And especially since then now everyone even smokes cannabis, it really would just be, yeah, sure. You can argue that in a way you're just taxing cannabis users, but I would argue that even overall, not just in terms of dollar worth, because you might even be able to make the argument that you can have higher prices in the legal market as opposed to a gray and black market, but people would still be preferring the legalized version because there's less of a risk in your product, and that is that's part of the price supply demand aspect is risk. And if you have less risk for something, that's going to be more of a demand for it, as opposed to vice versa. So, and that's this thing too. For example, in Ferguson, there is lots of institutional racism there. One of the reasons why there's so much institutional racism there is because people of color disproportionately have been, especially poor people of color, have been disproportionately charged with municipal fines. So like in parking violations, and maybe they stole like a beer when they're really young or something like that, like just petty crimes, or even just petty non-decriminalized acts that people typically aren't thrown in jail for. But the problem is these people can't pay these fines, and so over time these fines build up and they build up and they build up, and eventually people are thrown in jail for this. So I think that's the problem with decriminalization, is it doesn't address this serious issue that the war on drugs has done, is that it targets poor people, and especially people of color. And I think, once again, because this is a semantics problem, decriminalization does not mean it's just like off the books, we don't have to worry. Because like you even said, certain areas, they're going to probably be enforcing the law pretty hard. And so that's why legalization is important, because in those areas where they're going to still want to throw people in jail, you're going to have to make it as hard as possible. And legalization is the way to make it as hard as possible to throw people in jail for these crimes. Plus, legalization is how you get to a point where people are willing to pardon past people that done these quote unquote crimes. Because, once again, legitimization and decriminalization, even by the term of it, the term even, by in the human psyche, because remember, we're talking about practical solutions, and part of solutions is understanding the human psyche. And so even just decriminalization, there's something about the sense, okay, it sounds, kind of legal. It sounds kind of okay, as opposed to legalization. Cars are legal. People accept what cars are saying. We don't decriminalize cars, because if we decriminalize cars, people are going to be like, okay, that doesn't sound quite safe. So that's what I'm saying. Okay, I'm going to leave myself a minute or so for.
Oh, I knew you were going to bring up that libertarian idea of taxes. So again, I'm going to go back to the Dutch model. And those coffee shops do pay taxes, Logan. The thing is, the community, they choose not to enforce it. The police know what's going on. The community just doesn't, they don't care. They want that. They're not going to arrest the person. And that would apply here in the United States. I don't know if you're familiar with Al Capone. He went to jail for not paying taxes. The government had it out for him because he killed a lot of people, and he did it in a very brutal way. And he was making a lot of money because of prohibition, and they wanted a cut of that. So they found a book where he had some money on the books, and he didn't have to pay taxes on it. So they got him, and he went to prison, and that was the end of him. He got out of prison, but he was too sick after that. He wasn't even an old guy. So that's how they got him. So the tax issue, that doesn't really apply here. I mean, it does apply, but just saying that because I use the word decriminalization that you can't tax it, you're wrong, because I'm talking about non-enforcement. This means that a person would no longer be considered a criminal. It means that the government, that we realize this is illegal no matter what we want to call it. So we're not saying that. We're just saying we're not enforcing it. Yeah, it's against the law, but we're not going to force it, and that's how we're defining this. So it's actually very black and white. We're calling a spade here. Basically, we're not going to say that something's legal and deceive somebody. Like, say that I was a medical marijuana user and issue 3 passed, and I didn't know it, but I'm getting called into my have some back pain. I don't actually suffer from back pain, but I've been using marijuana because of my back pain, and I can buy it, or whatever. I get called into the office at my work, and now I'm getting fired because I failed the drug test, and I didn't know that under federal law that they could do that. So I was deceived. Now the federal government, I'm going to federal prison because they're knocking down my door, even though I was one of those 10 investors who got the right to produce marijuana. And now I'm going to federal jail, even though the state said it was okay, even though the state of Ohio said it was okay. So that's a gray area that's dangerous, and that's just going to get people in trouble. So I am looking at this in a black and white pragmatic way. I think you're looking at it in a gray way, because you don't quite understand what I'm saying. I'm trying to lay out a way where the most people benefit, where people aren't going to go to jail, or medical marijuana users can get their medicine. I don't want some rich guy at the stick telling me what to do, and most people they don't realize that. They think that's okay, and they're wrong. So I'll go ahead and let you.
All right. So I think in closing, once again, I think, we're just having, I mean, because like I said, I agree with a lot of what you're trying to say and what a lot of your goals are, because ultimately I want, as free a society as possible. I want the government to stay out of our lives as much as possible, especially including when it comes to drug use, what we put in our bodies. And I just think, once again, in closing, the legitimization issue is just, I think it's a real one. And this isn't, typically speaking, this decriminalization does not mean you're not going to get in trouble for it. And it's just too varied in too many different areas for decriminalization to be universally workable. Besides, I mean, there's plenty of plenty of places that decriminalized have worked out fine. Now, I'm not saying decriminalization is bad. I don't want to make that argument at all. I'm saying legalization is a more practical.
Thanks, Logan. You're obviously confused here. Again, non-enforcement means it's not criminal. It's no longer criminal. You can't be prosecuted for it, so nobody would be prosecuted, and it's going to be legal no matter what. So decriminalization is the only goal, or at least it's a step forward